Welcome back to Between the Silos, where we talk about sales and marketing alignment and why so many companies struggle with it. I'm your host, Jen Lawrence, CEO at Vye, and today I'm joined by Mike Paton. Mike has spent a lifetime learning from entrepreneurs. Today, he's grateful for the opportunity to give back as an author, speaker, host of the EOS Leader podcast, and EOS implementer. In the last 17 years, he's delivered over 150 keynote talks and workshops around the globe, conducted nearly 2,000 full-day EOS sessions with the leadership team of over 150 companies, co-authored 2 books in the Traction Library, and spent 5 years as an EOS worldwide visionary. He now spends all of his time helping entrepreneurs run better businesses and live better lives by mastering the simple concepts and practical tools he'll be sharing with us today. So, that's a lot, Mike. So glad to have you.
It's exhausting just listening to it. I'm gonna have to scale
right?
back.
How did you do it all?
Jeez. I like a very full schedule, Jen. I like a very full schedule.
Well, clearly, I am really glad to have you here. I have some friends and mentors that work with you and have hired you and just rave about you. So I'm excited for you to be here and tell the listeners a little bit about what is EOS. So you can help break that down. Like, what is it? And then also I want to add, like, what does an EOS implementer do?
Yeah, perfect. Well, here's what I like to do when I get asked a question like that, because I can yammer for a long time. I'm going to start with the shortest answer I can give you, and then you can ask clarifying questions from there. So the way I like to describe EOS is just a simple way of operating an entrepreneurial company. It's a complete set of practical tools and timeless disciplines designed to help the people who own and run entrepreneurial companies get everything they want from their businesses. So that's the simplest way to describe it.
Okay, I like it. How do you define entrepreneurial companies?
Yeah, great question. We have defined our target market. The vast majority of our clients, somewhere in the 80% range, are privately held companies with between 10 and 250 employees whose owners and leaders are growth-oriented, open-minded, want help, respectful and appreciative, and what I like to describe as more afraid of the status quo than they are of change.
I love that. That's a great definition. Also helpful when I'm talking about EOS to others. We run on EOS, and it's certainly changed our business for the better.
Great to hear.
Yeah.
Great to hear.
If you don't mind, will you tell me a little bit about what an EOS implementer then does for companies? I often get asked that question too. Like, how do I start? What does that mean? Who do you have?
I'm going to give a little bit of context to answer that question. So this will be a slightly longer answer. The original EOS implementer is my friend and mentor and business partner, Gino Wickman, the creator of EOS. And in the early days, what Gino was doing with the leadership teams of entrepreneurial companies in Southeast Michigan, and he was inviting them into his session room, a conference room with a conference table, and asking them to tell him about all their problems, challenges, roadblocks, and obstacles. And then he was helping them apply a simple set of tools and disciplines that he, through trial and error, perfected over time. And then he turned that approach, that sort of trial and error approach, into a proven way of working with a leadership team to help them strengthen the 6 key components of their business. Because what he found is all of those common problems, challenges, roadblocks, and obstacles tended to fall into 6 categories we now describe using a tool called the EOS model. But anyway, when he perfected this model, he decided he needed to figure out whether the reason the model he built was effective was because of his genius in facilitating conversations with leadership teams, or because what he was building, the EOS model, the EOS toolbox, and the EOS process, could be administered by any professional with enough experience with entrepreneurs that they could be helpful. And so that's when he started recruiting other people to do the work he was doing with these leadership teams in Southeast Michigan. And he hired a business partner, his original integrator, my dear friend and colleague, Don Tinney. And then he and Don perfected the model together, and they started recruiting other people. And I was one of the first EOS implementers they recruited and trained. So what an EOS implementer does is help the people who own and run entrepreneurial companies get on the same page with the company's vision, instill focus, discipline, and accountability throughout the organization, and become a more cohesive, functional, open and honest, healthy team. We call that vision, traction, healthy. And I do that following a proven process, using a set of proven tools, and helping those leadership teams strengthen the 6 key components of their business as defined by the EOS model.
Wow, that's awesome. So I want you to tell me about the 6 key components, but you set me up so nicely for Tales from the Trenches. So I'm going to start there and just like you have a proven process, you see it working over and over and over, and I have that same thing. And so I often tell companies about Traction EOS, and they're like hesitant to do that. So maybe you could share a little story about like a company you've worked with where you see what they need, and like just talk about why is it so hard for them?
Yeah, and the cool thing about my work, Jen, is I'm not the guy who figures out what they need. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I work with a company, there's never been an entrepreneur or an entrepreneurial leadership team in business who says to himself, yeah, I've got 90 spare minutes to waste going to visit this crazy guy called Mike who implements EOS for a living, if they're already getting everything they want from their business. Mm-hmm. So they come here with a common set of frustrations or challenges or roadblocks. And my job is to ask them a series of questions and help them build a series of tools that sort of expose the real root cause of their frustrations, challenges, and roadblocks. And so, a company in particular sticks out is I was doing some work for a board, a local board, and one of the board members came up to me after a session I did with the board, and he said, I think I need you to help me in the business I own. And when I got to know him, I realized he was super frustrated and good guy, generous guy, fun guy, but he was really frustrated because what he and the other members of his leadership team were working on every day and trying to accomplish they were not on the same page. And so, through the process of implementing EOS, what became clear is this is the vision the owner wanted the company to execute on. And sometimes getting everybody on the same page with your company's vision is not you convincing them you're right and they should want the same thing you do. Sometimes it's, hey, this is what I want to build in this company, and you're either with me or against me. Mm-hmm. And if you're against me, there's probably another organization somewhere in the world that has a vision that's more aligned with what you want to accomplish, and we should both move on. Mm-hmm. And for this particular owner, that happened twice, right? He turned over his leadership team twice. Okay. But he recently sold the business, but he sold the business after about a 5-year run of having exactly the right leadership team in place to just kick butt and take names, because he had the courage to say, this is what I want my business to stand for. And this is where we're going long term. And this is how we need to get there. And if you don't have the skills or experiences or passions, or you don't fit our culture, then there's probably a better place for you to work elsewhere. That would be a tale of the trenches I would share, and probably scare the heck out of your listeners. But that does happen more often than you might imagine.
Well, I see it all the too, and I imagine you do too, everywhere, right? Where you can see like fractures in the company, and I assume it's usually starting in that like that vision and alignment of where are we going.
Yeah, and life's too short. Life's too short to feel like it's your job to convince everybody to get on board, in my humble opinion.
How do you do that? How do you like when you start with that company, for example, and he's going, we have a problem, we're not on the same page. Maybe this is the time even to talk about those six key components. Like how does that shape up?
Yeah, well, let's start with the six key components, and then there's some process talk we need to have too. So what a company implementing EOS is doing is it's working to strengthen the six key components of any business. And this is based on a discovery Gino made in the early days that all of the problems, challenges, and obstacles tended to fall into six pretty common categories of frustration. Okay. And so the EOS model says to run a great business, you got to have a strong vision component, which means everybody in the company is 100% on the same page with who we are at the core, where we're going long term, and how we plan to get there. You got to have a strong people component. Very simply, you can't achieve a great vision without great people. So to get there, you need everybody to agree on what a great person looks and feels like in our organization. And then you've got to have a set of practices and tools and processes for attracting and retaining those kinds of great people. And then you got to strengthen your data component. That's the third component. You got to learn to run your business on a set of numbers that give you real insight and the ability to predict the future so that you're working to keep your numbers on track before the results are in. Okay. You got to learn to run your business on a handful of numbers rather than the feelings, egos, subjective emotions of the people on the leadership team. And when those three components are strong, vision, people, and data, that makes the fourth key component really important. You got to have a strong issues component. You got to be able to recognize your issues as they arise and then set them up, knock them down, and make them go away forever rather than seeing the same issues, frustrating issues linger for days, weeks, or even years. And then you got to strengthen the process component. You got to have the right and best way of doing the most important things of your business consistently followed by most of your people, or everybody's doing it their own way. That's just not sustainable in a growing and scaling organization. And then lastly, the traction component. The traction component is about instilling focus, discipline, and accountability in an organization so you're actually executing on the vision rather than feeling like everybody's spinning their wheels or working against you.
Mhm. So powerful and so it seems so simple. And I think that's the beauty of it, quite honestly, for us. It's just like it's simple and you can do it and over. And we've been using traction for years. And it just, like I said, it's made us very strong. And we keep growing and enhancing each of these components to be better. But when I meet with companies, each one of these, they'll do bits and pieces, but if they're not running on traction, it's like never all of it. And the data one, when you said that really hit me, is the running it before the results are in. I see that happen a lot where they're like chasing it after, or they're not consistent. Like every month is a new number that they're looking at. You see that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the data component's tough, right? When I started in business 1,000 years ago, very few businesses had any data. And so now everybody has lots of data, but it's lulled people into a false sense of security. Strengthening the data component is about using data to make faster, better, stronger decisions. And I see a lot of organizations out there drowning in data and a little paralyzed by the data. And so what we're trying to do is help make the data you've got more useful and help you become better decision makers for what it's worth.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was really helpful. I hope everyone takes a moment and we'll plug at the end. But I mean, Traction has a lot of really awesome free tools that kind of help you go through a lot of this.
Yeah. And Gino built it to be easy to understand and accessible to busy entrepreneurs. He saw a void in the marketplace as a young entrepreneur himself, that most of the business thought leadership at the time was written for people who were leaders in corporate settings. They had teams of minions bringing them decisions to make and people to lead and manage. And what he was used to was he was a guy with a full-time day job who was somehow also required to be a good leader, manager, and strategic decision maker. And that's what EOS was built to do. And so we've been very careful to make sure the basic foundational tools of EOS are available to the general public at no charge, and that we've given enough content into the marketplace for a lot of people to be pretty good at using those tools without having to spend more money than they've got to spend.
Absolutely. So you and I know the power, and we know that there's all these free tools. But I don't know if you find, you're probably in a different spot because this is what you do and why everyone comes to you. But I often find when I tell people about EOS, they're like hesitant and they kind of struggle and they're not sure about it. And like, do you have any ideas why that is? You hit on one early on, which was the size of your target. That was really enlightening for me. But what else do you see that like makes this so difficult?
Well, here's what I would say. The target market is the size of company where the need for a system like EOS is at a peak, right? If you're smaller than 10 people, you maybe haven't hit the ceiling as often as you need to, or as painfully as you need to implement something like EOS. And when you're larger than 250 people, it's almost always true that there are a handful of folks in the organization who already have a set of tools they use to solve the common problem EOS solves. So size shouldn't really be a dissuading factor here. I think the bigger issue is entrepreneurs are rugged individualists, right? You want to motivate an entrepreneur, tell them they can't do something or they need to do it like the rest of the world does it. Okay, and any entrepreneur worth his or her salt will get into a fighting stance and say, I'll dare me. Come on. I'll prove you wrong, right? And so, we all need help, man. Running an entrepreneurial company is lonely. It's often frustrating. Most of the time, you can't talk to the people in your business about it because they're part of the problem, or they think you're the problem, and you don't want to talk about that for sure. And then when you go home, your family's already sick of hearing you talk about the business, because most of the time you're complaining about. And so the bottom line is just ask for help. I mean, we don't believe, you have to hear us say this, the EOS implementer community does not believe every leader in every company should be running their business on EOS. We believe it's very difficult to grow and scale a business without some kind of operating system. But all we care about is that if you're not getting everything from the business that you want right now, and there's a small chance something like EOS might help, give us a call, reach out, send an email, text us, connect with us in some way, and give us a chance to learn a little bit about your business, explain what a company running on EOS really looks and feels like, rather than trying to figure that out yourself by looking at videos or reading a book or talking to somebody, and then decide if this can help you. And 50% of the time it's not a great fit, but 50% of the time it might be, and it's probably worth investigating a little further if you're not getting everything you want from your business.
Yeah. You said a few things in there that struck me, Mike, is that you said, they're a little bit rugged. And so that's what I see is like the structure feels for entrepreneurs that are like, this is just too confining for me. Like, and it feels like you're repeating the same thing. We have these meetings and we go through this format. And so, do you run into that where you have to like disguise it a little bit sometimes?
I mean, the business model that Gino built is designed to attract the kind of people who need what EOS brings. And convince the kind of people who aren't ready for EOS or want to solve their problems in a different way to take a different path. It's very rare that I get in the room for a full day session or an engagement to implement EOS fully where they haven't come to the conclusion that this is exactly what their business needs. And quite frankly, when they don't come to that conclusion and I'm worried about it, I'm maniacal about saying, are you sure? Because, I was looking at the eyes around the table when I was painting a picture of what strengthening the people component means. And I saw sheer terror on the eyes of half your team, and you need to be prepared for there to be some fallout here. Like I work really hard to make sure before somebody wants to implement EOS with me that they know exactly what's going to happen and that they're ready for the journey ahead.
That is really interesting. So it's almost like you're like you have to be prepared for this, because I find myself in a, when you've been using it and you see the value, I'm like, hey, you should really look into this. But you're kind of going, hey, you need to be ready fully before you just say that you're going to implement Traction EOS.
Yeah, the logo has always had a light bulb at its center. And the light bulb signifies what we're trying to do. We're trying to shine a light on all the dark nooks and crannies in every entrepreneurial company and help the leadership team see that there's a way to solve all of those issues. And if the leadership team or the owner or a key person on that leadership team just wants to keep turning off the light, EOS isn't for you. You don't want to solve your problems, don't call me. Okay. If you want to grow and scale your business, and when there's an obstacle in your path, you're willing to confront it head on and work with your team members to figure out the right and best way to solve that problem and keep moving. EOS is a great solution, but man, don't be under the misguided belief that everything's going to stay the same for you. It's just going to fix everybody else in your business, because EOS changes the way your company operates.
That was really powerful. And you said a minute ago, if you're not getting everything you want from your business, we can help. And I was like, yes, that. So that was also the point that stuck, is like, you don't have to know all of it right now, but if you're not getting what you want out of your business, look into it. Call Mike.
That's right. And there's, operators are not standing by. Like I'm going to, me and the rest of the EOS implementer community are be absolutely brutally honest with you about what this is all about. And we're going to help you make the right decision for you and your team. And sometimes that's not implementing EOS. And sometimes it's implementing EOS, but it's implementing EOS with somebody different than me. That's kind of the way we all roll. And so it really is a pretty clean opportunity to learn and not feel compelled to take an action that you're not ready to take.
One final question before I get you into the hot seat here. I heard a lot at the Traction EOS conference about people say, do you run Traction Pure? That's a common term. What is your take on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll call a purity check and say I call it EOS Pure. Traction is what you get when you implement EOS. Traction Pure is just using the tools the way they were designed. That's all it means. And so, there are a lot of people out there, self-implementing companies, who change the rules to fit their unique organization. So, for example, one of the rules is, you should have 3 to 7 company rocks every quarter and 3 to 7 total rocks as an individual. And there are a lot of people out there who think that's poppycock and they can handle 11 rocks. We're better than your pin. We're going to have 11 rocks. Okay. That's not EOS Pure, because when everything is important, nothing's important. And, truthfully, Jen, I'm not a rigid compliance person here. I'm a visionary entrepreneur myself. I've never met a rule I didn't think I could impose upon. So There are some things you can personalize and make your own, and nothing bad's going to happen. But there are other things that are going to cause problems for you. And I think that's probably the greatest value of having an EOS implementer in your corner, whether that implementer is somebody you've hired to help you and your team go through the implementation journey, or whether it's something you have an initial contact with and then decide to do this on your own. It's nice to have somebody to call and say, hey, Paton, my leadership team thinks we can take on 11 company rocks. What do you think about that? And then you'd get about a 8-minute rant from me, and you'd go back to your team and said, Paton doesn't think that's a very good idea. So that's EOS Pure.
Thank you. That is a great definition of it. All right, finally, tell me, early morning emails or late night work sessions?
Early morning emails.
Okay, all right. Music or silence while working?
Music for sure. I've got a soundtrack playing in my head right now.
Really? Okay, what is it?
I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. A lot of Bruce Springsteen, a lot of country music. I've got a very diverse set of musical tastes, so it bounces around a little bit, but I need something.
Something.
I need something.
Awesome. Digital or handwritten notes? This is not really so
sure.
I know.
Handwritten for sure.
Yep, it's gotta be.
Yep.
Oh, well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. I told you earlier, you're kind of been a hero of mine and traction for sure. EOS is something I see a lot of value in. So I appreciate all the time you've given me today.
Well, my pleasure. And thanks for doing this for the business owners out there who need the help. I appreciate it very much.
And for all the listeners out there, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you always know when a new episode lands. Until then, don't forget, the best things to happen to your team will always happen between the silos.